Hey everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel, M Stuart Paintings. On today's acrylic painting tutorial, we're going to learn how to paint realistic waves and paint a sunset over the ocean. I'm going to teach you how to mix realistic colours and how to block in your painting to create an underpainting, where you can learn how to paint clouds and add detail over the top and use colours and brush techniques to do transitions. I'm going to teach you how to paint a wave, how to paint realistic waves and use brushes so you can create this really realistic seascape. So let's get into it. So for the painting tutorial, you're going to need the following colours. They are titanium white, Naples yellow, cad yellow, matte orange, rose pink, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, phthalo turquoise, iris purple, raw umber, matte black. Now I have a burnt sienna painted canvas that I've just used chalk to create a horizon halfway down the canvas. I've just used chalk just to create an outline of some clouds, and then I've used cobalt blue just to create a dark outline so I know where to have some waves. So if you'd like to pause the video and just copy down the outline, feel free to do so. You don't have to paint your canvas burnt sienna. I just do it because when we're using pastel colours, it shows me where I've missed when painting. So pause the video if you want to copy it down. If not, we're just going to get started. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to block in our painting and we're going to paint the sky, and we're going to create an underpainting, which is the background sky before we put the clouds on. So I'm going to use a big round headed brush, and I'm going to get lots of white on my brush, and I'm just going to block in this area here on the right. So we're going to have the light coming from the right hand side. So we're not going to have a sun or anything, we're just going to have a nice bright sky coming from the right hand side. So we're going to use really pastel colours in today's tutorial because I want to create a really nice wispy sunset. So we're going to use all these warm colours on this side. So we're going to use predominantly white, and we're going to add a dot of yellow, just a tiny bit of yellow, so more white than anything because otherwise it's too bright, and a dot, like a pinprick of black, and we should get this buttery yellow, and that's Naples yellow. So I appreciate not everyone has the colours on the list at the beginning. So to make Naples yellow, all we do is you add lots and lots of white, predominantly titanium white, a little bit of cad yellow and a dot of black. Now the great thing about using the big brush is you can cover more ground of your canvas easier. So I always use really big wide brushes to block in. You can just get lots and lots of paint, and don't worry if your work is streaky because acrylics are water based. You tend to get some brush marks and streaks, so all we want to do is block it in, and then we can fix all the streaks and neaten it all up as we go along. So we've got this nice hot colour at the horizon with our yellow, and we're going to make a darker shade because the sky is getting a little bit cooler. We're going to use this cool purple, this one here in the middle. It's called iris purple, and to get that, all you do is you add cobalt blue to your purple. So a little bit of cobalt blue to your purple, and you should get a cooler shade. And once you've mixed that purple, if you just add lots and lots and lots of white to it, you should get this nice really lavender colour, this really lovely lavender pastel purple. So it's predominantly white, a little bit of purple and a little bit of cobalt blue, and you should get this colour. And again, look, just brush it into the yellow just while it's wet. Just create X shapes with your brush. Don't worry if the shades mix. But all we want to do is just create a slightly darker, cooler shade of sky as it goes up into the top of the painting. So everyone asks me why I paint my canvas burnt sienna, and it's for this exact reason. When you're using acrylics, because they're water based, you can see where the dark colour is shining through the pastel colour. Now if I was using a white canvas, I wouldn't notice some of the brush marks, I wouldn't notice bits of the canvas shining through. So what I do is I use a dark colour in the burnt sienna, and then I can see exactly where I've missed, where I need to put thicker paint and maybe give it a second coat of paint and take out those brush marks. So just by painting your canvas a dark colour, doesn't have to be burnt sienna. It's just I know a lot of artists use it as a trick, and that's why they do it. So look, we've blocked in our top of our painting. with this really pastel purple. And then just at the bottom you get, on the horizon, you tend to get little low lying clouds. All we're going to do, we're just going to mix a colour for that. So we're just going to get some orange, and we're just going to add that to the white and purple, and a little bit of yellow. It's a tiny bit of the more purple and white, and more white, and a little bit of brown, just a dot of brown. Brown and blacks are really good for making things earthy. So if you want to suck a bit of the colour out and make your colours a little bit more earthy and neutral, by adding a little bit of black or a little bit of brown, you can just make it more neutral. So all we're doing, we're just creating sort of the illusion of sort of low varying clouds just on the horizon. So as you can see here, now I'm zoomed in, you can see some of the brush marks and you can see some of that burnt sienna shining through. So an easy trick, if you get watery paint and you want to make it a bit nicer, more vibrant, is to just dry your work with a hairdryer and then just reapply the same tones that you've just mixed over the top. And that will take out all of the horrible brush marks, if you've got any. So by just drying your painting with a hairdryer, and then if you just add the same colours over the top, they're a lot more vibrant. And you can just work on your transitions and just blend it a little bit. So look, you can see here, look at the difference, just putting a second layer of paint on, how much more vibrant and more purpley that looks. So it's just a little trick. Obviously I'm just fast forwarding it, I'll put the video back to normal speed in a minute. It's just, you just sat through this, I don't want to subject you to more of the same, but it's just a little trick where you just put a second layer of paint over and you just get rid of all the brush marks, just blending that purple into the yellow, really easy. So just take your time, just work on your transitions to try to blend it by creating X shapes, and when you're happy with it and you've got this nice gradual gradient from the yellow into the purple, and we've got that sort of dark area at the horizon, what we're going to do now is we're going to block in our water. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to block in the sand just here on the left hand side. So we're going to create a nice sort of sandy colour. So we're going to take some orange, and we're going to take some purple. So orange and purple make brown. So by adding purple, not only does it cool it down, it just makes it a bit more brown. And then we're just going to add a little bit of a warm grey. Now to make warm grey, all we do is add black, orange and white together. So black, orange and white together. And you can just add more black to make it darker and more white if you want to make it lighter. So orange, brown and a little bit of black. And we should get this nice colour. So let's test it, that's nice. So the good thing is with this colour, it's quite similar to the burnt sienna, so we only probably have to do one coat. So all we're going to do is just block in, we've got this outline here, so we're just going to block in all this sand. And then at the bottom of the painting, we're going to make it slightly tad darker. So we're going to make this nice and warm. It's got lots of orange in it. So the colour's a nice warm colour. So let's just block in this top bit. And then as we move into the corners of the bottom of the painting, all we're going to do, look, we're just going to add a cooler shade of purple to the mix. So just add more purple to the mix, and it will just make it a darker shade of brown. And again, that's just to frame your painting, to make your corners darker, because we're going to sign it in the bottom corner, so we want it nice and dark so our signature shows up. And also by having darker corners in your painting, it just makes the viewer focus down the middle. It's a little trick, just by having little darker corners. And also if the sun is at the top, your sand at the top will be a little bit brighter, and these areas in the corners will be getting less sun and it's a little bit darker. So it all makes sense. So there we go, we're just blending those two shades together, and you won't even notice the transition so smooth. So once that's dry, if you dry it with a hairdryer, and the reason I'm saying to dry it with a hairdryer is we're going to make a really nice pastel colour for the ocean water, so you don't want it mixing with that brown. So if you just clean your brush, and if you dry your work, we're going to start working on the transition of the water. So the water is always a little bit darker than the sky because obviously it's a bit more dense. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create some warm colours at the top and some cooler colours at the bottom. So if you think that the sun is nearer the top, so that's going to be warmer, and towards the viewer at the bottom it's going to be a little bit cooler. So we're going to use the colours here on the right, the cooler colours. We're going to use this iris purple, which was, remember, it was purple and cobalt blue mixed together. And then we're going to add plenty of white to that mix. So a bit like the colour we made for the sky, but less white. So it's still going to be a little bit darker. And then we're just going to add a tiny bit of brown. And still plenty of white. We want everything to be very pastel, so that's why we're using plenty of white in today's tutorial. And all we're going to do, we're going to block in our bottom of our ocean. So if you imagine this is all the water that's very, very shallow that comes towards the beach. So all we're going to do is we're going to use this really nice, cool, purpley bluey colour, but it's still very, very pastel. And the great thing about it being so pastel is you can still see some of the cobalt blue outlines for our waves. So by painting over the top, we can block it in and create an underpainting, and then we can put all the details and the waves over the top. So as we move towards the sunlight, we're going to get a little bit warmer. We're going to use rose pink here, so this one in the middle. And all we're going to do, look, we're just adding a little bit of heat to our mix. So we've got all these warm colours on the left and some cool colours on the right. So by adding a little bit of pink for heat, we can just make this a tad brighter and hotter. So don't worry if you cover up your outlines, we can paint them back in a minute. For our waves, all we want to do is just add a tiny bit of pink just to make this ocean underpainting a little bit warmer. So there we go. Easy peasy, all done. So as we move up, we're going to get even more pink into the mix, a little bit more heat and a little bit of orange, even more heat, because it's getting closer to that sun. Still predominantly white. So I'm just going over the top here, just making it a little bit more hotter, just by using that orange and pink into the mix. I'm just creating the X shapes, and I'm just blending it. Look, X shapes. Just blending it into that cooler blue at the bottom. So this area is cooler, this is warmer. And then we're going to get even warmer as we go towards the sun. So again, it's just to all match the transitions. So more pink. More orange. So we're adding more heat. And now yellow to make it even hotter. But remember to keep adding lots and lots of white to make it as pastel as you can. And then we're just going to block in this part of the painting. So as you see, it's just a shade warmer each time. So don't worry if you go over your cobalt blue, and don't worry if your horizon's not straight. We can use tape once it's dry to neaten everything up. But by just gently blending it into that low lying cloud and the Naples yellow, it kind of looks like it's fading off the ocean into the distance, into the sky. So as I say, don't worry, the cobalt blue should shine up underneath because this colour is so pastel. You should still see your outlines if you've painted them in cobalt blue. So there we go, we just blended it all in, doing our X shapes. And we've got this lovely transition from a nice warm colour at the top to a slightly cooler colour right at the bottom of the painting. So there we go. Transition is lovely. So we've got this lovely pastel sky now and a lovely pastel ocean, and we've got our sand, and you can even get, look, a cobalt blue and any dark colour. I use cobalt blue. You could use black or you could use brown, but I think cobalt blue is just, it's not too harsh, so when you're painting it over it, it's not like black where it's overpowering. So all I'm doing, I'm just blocking back in my wave that I want. So I'm going to have lots of the shadow on the left hand side of the wave, and then I'm going to have sort of the wash on the right, and then this one's not going to be as harsh and big. This could be a smaller wave in the background. So I'm just using cobalt blue just to create an outline. Same here, just where the water and the beach meet. So I'm just outlining the water to give it a little bit of a shadow. And then what we're going to start doing is, now we've got the underpainting, we've got this lovely transition in our sky and our ocean. We're going to start working on the clouds and start painting all the clouds. So just off camera, all I'm doing, I'm mixing some pink and purple together. I'm adding a little bit of brown and lots of white. So pink, purple, a little bit of brown and lots of white. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of orange just to heaten it up, just to make it a little bit hotter. And a little bit of that warm grey, so a dot of black and more white. There we go. And then all I'm going to do, just on the horizon, I'm just going to create some low clouds. So I'm just trying to create little shapes. So remember, acrylics always dry darker. So if you see that your paint, like mine, is very, very dark, always remember it's going to dry a shade darker. So because we want this to be really pastel, this painting, I think this is a bit too harsh. So just to add a little bit more white, sorry it's a bit off camera, but all I'm doing is just adding a little bit more white to the mix. I could just go over the top, look. So with the new colour, by adding lots of white to the colour, I can just go over the top and it's not as harsh. Now the reason we don't want to make it too harsh is if you have really dark colours, it brings it towards the viewer. And we want these clouds to be off into the distance, far off past over the ocean. So what we're doing, we're using pastel colours to push them back. We don't want them too harsh, because when they dry they'll look really close towards the viewer. And you can even have some bobbling about. Just try to make them not so straight. Just try to make them all different shapes and sizes. So there goes. So as you can see, now they're dried a little bit darker, and we're just going to add some orange to the mix. So orange, purple, pink, and lots of white. So we're just going to create a really bright pastel orange now. So always put lots and lots of white, remember, so it's not so harsh. And we're just going to have some brighter clouds. So all I'm doing, I'm just splatting the paint over, and I'm just trying to create wonky lines. So clouds are never dead straight. So all I do, look, I just go back and forth and just try to create wonky lines. Little bobbles on them. And this is how I paint clouds. Look, I push down really, really hard, and then I ease up on the pressure and just sort of create little wiggly shapes. So I load up my brush, and if I push down, I get really big clouds, and if I just ease up on the pressure, I can just create these sort of little wispy ones that sort of break off. So look, if you put loads of paint on and you push down hard, you get really, really harsh clouds. And then as the paint runs off your brush, you just ease up on the pressure. Look, you can just create sort of little faint ones, just sort of scraping against the canvas. So you hardly notice them, look. So look, if you load up your brush, you're going to get really, really harsh ones. So we've got this nice transition in the clouds, and then as we move up into the painting, we're just going to add more purple to make the clouds look darker. So sorry it's a bit off camera, but all we're doing, we're just adding more of a cooler shades. So we're using purple just to the mix. So orange, purple, brown and white. But still got lots of white in there to make it pastel. And all we're doing, we're just gently mixing it into the previous colour. So all I do, look, I just make little shapes to create these sort of breakaway clouds. All sort of joining up. I know a lot of people struggle with clouds, but they're really easy once you know how. It's working on the colour and working on the transition, just like we did with the underpainting, with the background sky and the ocean. It's just trying to trick the eye using colour, just to create these sort of shapes. As I say, I don't really use that many reference photos because I do this so often I can paint these scenes out of my mind. But if you are struggling, take lots of photos or go on things like Instagram and Pinterest and things like that and just study clouds. So look, if I push down really, really hard, look, I'm going to get really thick clouds. And if I ease up massively on the pressure, I can create little wispy ones. So push down really, really hard, and you'll get these really big, thick, harsh clouds. And then if you ease up on the pressure and just tap the canvas, you can get really little ones. Yeah, so things like Instagram, Pinterest are great. Instagram is fabulous because you can follow people who take wonderful photos of clouds and seascapes and things like that, and you can obviously practice. You can get yourself a little sketchbook and you can practice painting clouds. I like to take photos all the time of waves and clouds, and then I combine them. So if the clouds are nice in one photo, I'll use that, and then if the waves are nice in another photo, I'll use that and sort of combine the two. So all I'm doing, I'm just going out a little bit diagonally, same technique. I'm pushing down to get harsh clouds and easing up to get sort of wispier ones. I'm just having a few that are sort of breaking away. And same over this side. So that's looking cool. Some nice clouds. And then just because there's a big jump between the orange and the purple, all I'm going to do, I'm just going to mix some orange into the mix. So it's purple, brown, orange and white. I'm just a shade lighter similar to the colour we had previously. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to wipe off most of the paint. I'm just going to have a tiny bit on my brush, and I'm just going to shade in this bit of the purple, just so the transitions look a little bit smoother. So just like we did on the background sky, I'm just making the transitions in the clouds. So this is what I was saying, once you know how, it's really, really easy, and this sort of thing tricks the eye and gives the realism. So just work on your transitions and your work will look a lot more realistic. So I'm just putting a few little dots of clouds here and there, just randomly. And then what you can do, I'll show you a bit more in detail later at the end of the video, but what you can do, if you're unhappy with your clouds, you can mix up some of the sky colour. So you can either mix up some of the Naples yellow or some of the lavender, and you can use a small brush and you can poke holes in your clouds just to make them look more realistic. So if your clouds are a bit clunky and a bit all over the shop, you can poke holes in them using the sky colour just to make them look a bit, again, more realistic. So it's a little trick. I'll show you at the end how you can do that. But before we do that, we want our clouds to be a bit far back. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get a clean brush, a nice soft brush, and it's very dry. So the brush is very, very soft, almost like a makeup brush or a blender brush. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to mix some white and some of the yellow, the cad yellow, to make a Naples yellow. So predominantly white and a little bit of yellow. And I'm just going to, with my dry brush, just wipe it on a cloth. I always use my painting clothes, and take most of the paint off the brush. And then all you do is you just glaze over the top. So the painting is dry. This area of clouds is now dry because acrylics dry really quick. And all you do, by just glazing it over the top with some of that sky colour, you can push back those clouds and make them look more far away into the distance. So it's a little trick. All you do, look, you just glaze over the top. The pinky clouds, the pinky orange clouds will still show up. But all I'm doing, I'm just making them a bit more softer and a bit further back. And if you want to bring them forward, you can just use darker colours and bring them towards the viewer. So it's an easy trick. Just by glazing over the top, you can just make them look not as harsh. And then I'm going to get some white. And all I'm going to do is just lighten up the right hand side. So again, I'm just glazing over this dry painting and I'm just lightening up the right hand side. Just using pure white. And again, with acrylics, sometimes when you lay acrylics over the top of another colour, it will absorb it, so white will not show up too much. So what we'll do is at the end, we'll go over this white and just make it a little bit more vibrant. So it's just to imply sunlight coming from the right hand side. And again, look, you just glaze over the top. Really easy, nice little art trick. So look, you can just push back clouds, you can make them look more wispy, or later on we could add highlights or things like that. So it's up to you. But learning these little brush techniques and little cheats, what they're really, really good for is when you're painting landscape paintings, they're really good to know your tools. So if you think, oh, I've got a big brush for blocking in, I've got the same brush, and if I have it dry I can use that for glazing and making things further back. So there we go. So now we've worked on our ocean, we've got all these lovely transitions, we've got our lovely clouds. We're going to dry the painting, please. So please dry it. Measure a straight horizon. I always use a tape measure and chalk, and then it won't leave any dirty pencil marks on your canvas. So if you use chalk, it won't stain your canvas with black or anything like that. And then once it's nice and straight, we're going to work on the ocean. So I'm going to teach you how to paint waves. So I'm using a colour called phthalo turquoise. Now you can make phthalo turquoise using yellow and cerulean and cobalt blue. But Phthalo turquoise out of a tube is really, really good because it just looks better than when you mix it. So I always recommend, if you can buy it, try to buy it. If not, you can mix it with these colours. And if you add a little bit of brown to your phthalo turquoise and a little bit of the rose pink, so phthalo turquoise, a little bit of brown, a little bit of the pink, and a tiny bit of purple. And the reason we're putting brown in it is to make it look more earthy, and the reason we're putting pink into it is to put a bit of the sky colour. And all we're going to do with our flat brush is just block in. Now we've got this cobalt blue outline that's really, really helpful. We can match the colours and try to use the colours to create the realism. So by having phthalo turquoise, a little bit of brown to make it earthy, a little bit of pink just to match the sky, and a little bit of purple just to cool it down and bring it towards the viewer. Now a flat brush is really, really good for creating little divots and lines to create the illusion of 3D water. So we've got this lovely transition in the underpainting. So we've got this lovely pinks and blues underneath. And all we're doing, we're using this darker colour, and I'm using the very edge of the flat brush to create little divots. So if I zoom in for you, so it's a bit easier. So I load up my brush, and all I do, if you imagine the wave is like a barrel, I'm creating wave shapes and creating little curves to create the illusion that the water is rising up into a wave. So if you imagine like a barrel, like a curve, what we're doing, we're trying to create that illusion by just coming down, and then gradually, as we get down towards the beach, we're going to make it more flat because the water is nice and flat and shallow. So we're coming up at an angle, we're just using that edge of that brush. So look, we're just creating little divots at an angle. And that will create the illusion that the wave is rising up into the water. So I'm just blending it in just to cover up some of that cobalt blue. So some of these aren't going to be so much at an angle because the water is starting to go a bit flatter. So I'm just blending it in. And then around here we're going to have a bit of a shadow because we're going to have some wash. So where you get the white bit of a wave, where all the water sort of mixes up, we're going to create that in a minute. I'll show you how to do that. So a lot of people have been asking me how to paint waves. A lot of people ask me how to paint clouds. If there's anything you want to learn, please put that in the comments below, and I'll try to make a tutorial for all you guys on subjects that you want to learn. So we're going to add a little bit of cobalt blue to our mix, and the reason we're adding cobalt blue is we're just making it a little bit darker and the shadow a little bit harsher. So if you imagine this big bundling wave is going to crash into the shore, well, it's going to have a big dark shadow underneath it, and on the top as it rises up, because it's coming towards the viewer, we want to make it nice and harsh and look like it's bellowing towards the beach. So just by adding a little bit of a cool colour in the blue, we can just make it look a bit harsher. We don't want to use any blacks in today's painting, apart from just a dot of it, because we want to keep it very pastel and very wispy and very nice. So look, same trick, we're just outlining it and we're just creating a slight angle. So just little divots just to create the three-dimensional effect. And then as we come down, the water's getting much more shallow, so the lines are almost flat. So look, just making it look a lot less choppy. So we're just creating little divots just to give it the illusion of texture. And look, you can create thick ones, you can create really thin ones. Just use the edge of the brush. It's almost like a scalpel. It's so sharp that you can get really good straight lines. So it's, again, just knowing your tools, it's really easy to cheat if you know what brushes to use. Makes your life a hell of a lot easier. So as we come down, we're gonna get darker, but first we're gonna paint the wave that's further back, and we're going to add more pink because it's closer to the sunlight. So if you imagine our wave we've just painted is really close to the viewer, but this one here is not going to be as harsh, it's not going to be as dark, so that's why we've added a bit of pink to make it look more purple. And by doing that and having a less harsh colour, we're pushing it into the background. So remember, in all the other tutorials we were using pastel colours or things like cobalt blue to push things like mountains far off into the distance. What we're doing, we're just using a less harsher colour and adding a bit more of the sky colour, which is the pink, just to make it look further back. But we're doing the same trick. Look, we're doing the divots diagonally to make the wave come up, and as the water is a little bit flatter, a little less choppy, we're just going around and creating straight lines. Just try to have them random, don't try to have them all the same length. Have some like a dot and some like quite long, and it would just look more realistic. So there you go, it's such an easy technique. Once you nail the transition of the colour underneath, and then once we now put the detail over the top, same with the clouds, same with the waves, it's so much easier to do. And then I'm just adding a little bit of white to the mix, a little bit more pink. So now it's almost going grey. And I'm just wiping off most of the paint, and then I'm just creating really far off waves. So by adding white and a bit more pink, we're making this really pastel colour that is really barely noticeable, but just by creating almost straight lines now in the background, so waves on the horizon almost flat, and just have them very, very, very thin. Again, it's very hard to see here unless you're very close up, but it just gives the illusion of the ocean sort of fading off into the distance. So when you're happy with it, we've got this dark colour and the light colour. So now we're going to work on a darker colour to come even more into the foreground, to come into the beach. So to make a darker colour, we're going to still use our phthalo turquoise. Had a bit of brown just to make it nice and earthy. And we're going to add much more cobalt blue just to make it darker and cooler. A little bit of purple. And just a dot of pink this time, so hardly any of the sky colour. A bit more brown. There we go. And you can even, if you want to, add a tad of black. If you really want to, just a dot of black. So I'm just going to add a little dot of black just to make it even darker. There we go. So we're making an even darker colour here. So we're right into the foreground. So this is coming up onto the beach. And all we're doing, we're going to create a dark outline. So when the water comes up onto the beach, almost like a moving carpet, it's going to have a nice dark shadow underneath it just to give it that 3D effect. So again, I'm just using the edge of a flat brush. And again, you can create waves just by creating the divots, but can you see now the colour is just a lot darker. It brings it closer towards you. So a little trick, if you want to bring something closer towards the viewer, you can just use a darker colour. Now if you angle your brush sort of diagonally and just use the very corner, what you can do is just create little waves. So as the water comes up towards the beach, you get these tiny little waves. And all I'm doing, look, I'm just creating a little diagonal. I'm just leaving gaps in between, just so some of that underpainting shines through. And it just gives the illusion of a wave. So how to paint waves is really, really easy when you know how. Just tricks of the trade with the brushes and the colours, and combine the two with the underpainting, and you can make it look really three-dimensional. So as it's more shallow here, we've just got more straight waves, and then we could just have around the edge. Try to make the edges, I'm using a flat brush here, but you can use a round-headed brush. Try to make the edges of the water a bit slightly curved. They're never too angled. If you think of water, it's nice and smooth, it's nice and feminine, it's really curvy. But we just want to create a nice dark outline, and then we can have some divots just to give it some texture. So a bit like the clouds, if you push really, really hard, you'll get really harsh lines. And if you ease up on the pressure and just barely touch the canvas, you get these really thin ones. So now if we remove our tape, and we can get rid of those horrible chalk marks, so just lick my finger, get rid of these chalk marks, we should have a really three-dimensional, realistic ocean seascape. But being us perfectionists, we want to work on the sea foam aspect of the wave. We want to add all the choppy bits and some of the sea foam that comes up onto the shore. So we're going to do that now. So we're going to swap to a smaller brush, and we're going to mix some cobalt blue, which is nice and cool. We're going to add some cerulean blue, which is nice and a bit more turquoise. And then we're going to add lots of white. So cobalt blue, cerulean blue, and lots of white. So there we go. So we've got this nice cool blue, almost like a sky colour. And what we want to do is we want to create the illusion of shadow. So we're using cool blues rather than just pure white. And again, it's just to give it a three-dimensional look. So what we're trying to do, if you imagine the bottom of the wave, just like what we've done with the outline, this area that I'm just colouring in now is getting less sunlight. So we're using cool colours. So what have I been teaching you? Blues and purples are very good for creating shadows. So you wouldn't have pure white. If you use pure white, it would look a bit comic-y. So we're using this nice cool blue just to make it look like this area is a bit in the shade. So all I'm doing is just right at the bottom of this area of the wash, I'm just sort of colouring it in just as it meets the shadow. So there we go, easy peasy. We can have some bits of blue just coming round. So if you imagine a wave is like a barrel, it sort of bellows down, so we just want some of that darker blue just coming round. And we're going to do the same while we've got that colour on the far off wave. So don't worry so much about the shape right now, we can change that in a minute. We just want to colour it in. So these cool blues are really, really good. If you ever paint something where you have lots of sunlight on a white background, so imagine snow or something, you can use these cool blues and purples to create shade or to create areas that are in shadows. So we've left a few little gaps, and what we're going to do, look, we're going to add lots and lots of white to that mix. So again, it's an off-white, it's still got a hint of blue in it, and we're going to add a tiny bit of the cool purple. So tiny bit of purple, but predominantly white, so very, very pastel. And all we're going to do is we're going to add some highlights over the top to again make it look more 3D. So if you imagine the sunlight is coming from the right and this wave would have its back to the sun, so the bottom areas would be more in the shade and the top of the wave would be getting a bit more sunlight. So just by combining the darks and the brighter highlights, you can make it look 3D. So we're just trying to create sort of patterns, sort of bubbles even, excuse me, just where the wash all sort of churns up as it comes towards the beach. So again, by leaving little gaps, look, just leave little gaps, just imply the detail. We're leaving lots of that blue at the base for the shadow and just having some sort of squiggles of white, but leaving little gaps in the blue to shine through, just to make it look like it's all churning up. And we can do the same in the background. So if the light's coming from the top, you can have little highlights at the top and then just leave plenty of gaps for the blue and just create the illusion of bubbles and froth. Again, it's all really subtle things. If you just think with painting, it's all just little steps. So when you first do the painting, you think, God, I can never do that. But if you just follow each step and just do it to the best of your ability, each step all comes good and it all combines. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to make some of the shadow colour. Do you remember we made for the wave, which was phthalo turquoise, purple, a little bit of brown, and a little bit of pink. And I've just added a little bit of cobalt blue to make it nice and dark. And all I'm doing, look, I'm just curling it round. So do you remember when we did the wave, we curled up diagonally? Well, I'm just curling around downwards now, if that makes sense. Look, I'm just sort of trying to make it look more cylinder, like it's bellowing down. So I'm trying to create that barrel effect. And also, I'm just going at the bottom and just trying to make it look all bobbly. So I don't want it to be flat. Water, as I say, is very curvy. So just by putting little divots, again, look, just little shapes with the shadow colour, you can just make it look more realistic. So it's all a bit wonky, going everywhere, just like water does. There we go, that looks cool. So look, just curve it round, just to create that sort of barrel effect. So it looks a bit more circular. And I'm just going to get some of that blue and white. And look, you can join it up. You could have some sea foam. All I do is create little zigzags. So these are sort of when the wave comes up and it's nice and shallow, you get all that sort of froth and zigzags. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to mix some of the lighter colour. So do you remember it was adding a little bit more pink to the mix, just to make it not as harsh. A little bit of brown and a little bit of purple. And we're just going to do the same trick. Now I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little bit of brown to my mix, just a little bit, because I think this is just a tad too light. Sometimes with your paint, if it dries, you have to go back and mix the colours, and if you've put a little bit different, you can get a different shade. So sometimes it's worth buying a like a little mister for plants and spraying your palette with water. And I forgot, so my lovely colour we made for this wave, I thought, why not make it a little bit darker and just paint over it, just so it all matches. I don't want one side of the wave being darker and one side of it being lighter. So again, look, all I'm doing, I'm using the shadow colour just to come at the top, just to create sort of curves, so it looks like the wave is coming round. And then because I've used that colour in the middle, I'm just going to shade the sides just so it all matches. Again, just putting little divots at the bottom just to make it look all rough. There we go. So we've got these two really realistic waves, and we want to create some sea foam here in the foreground. So as the water and the ocean meets the beach, we just want to create some detail just so it's not so flat. So a really easy trick is to get a small brush, a fine liner, mix some cerulean blue and cobalt blue into white again, but just add lots and lots and lots of white this time. Sorry, it's a bit off camera. So it's predominantly white with a hint of cerulean blue and cobalt blue. And you know what? I'm going to make it darker. I'm going to make it the same colour that we use for the wave. So cerulean blue and cobalt blue, and less white this time. So I'm not going to add as much white. I'm going to have it nice and pastel but quite dark. So there you go, a little bit darker than we had for the wave. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to create the shadow of the shallow water as it comes in. So as you come into the beach, it creates sort of a nice curvy sort of carpet look. And what we're going to do is, by using this cool blue that's a little bit darker, because remember it's in the foreground, it's coming towards the viewer, so it's a little bit darker. We're going to create the outer ridge to make it look, again, more 3D. So if you think this outer ridge is not getting as much sunlight, so we're just creating this nice smooth ridge. So by using this cool blue, we can really emphasize that. So we've got this nice cool ridge, and we're going to do the same here. Now there's the subscribe button and the bell notification. If you want to know when the latest tutorials are dropping, if you click the little bell notification here on YouTube, it will alert you as soon as a tutorial is uploaded, so you can be the first to watch it. Thank you so much everyone for liking and subscribing to the channel already. The channel is doing really well and growing very fast now. So thank you very much, because every time you like and share the videos, YouTube pushes the algorithm and it shows it to more artists, and more artists get to learn by watching the tutorials. So thank you so much for liking and subscribing. So we've got this nice cool ridge now, and you can even use that blue just like we did in the far off waves, just to create some little divots again that aren't so harsh, just in the foreground here. If you want to, again, it just creates a little bit more of a realistic wave. So I'm just using that blue just to graze the canvas and just create some divots. Can have some just coming here in the foreground. All these little tricks are just to texturize the water, just to make it look more realistic. And then now we're going to add lots and lots and lots of white to that mix. So I'm going to take a tiny bit of the blue, but predominantly white, just like we did with the highlights on the wave. So it's more white than anything. And all I'm doing, I'm just taking a tiny bit of the blue. And what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to paint over it. I'm just going to go right up to the ridge. I'm just going to paint over a little bit of this side, because this side's just going to be... The shadow's not going to be as harsh, because obviously you can't see behind it. But as you can see here, as the water comes down, you can see a shadow. I'm just leaving it a line, so I'm almost going around it and leaving a nice line of blue. So I'm just going adjacent to it. So look, alongside it, and I'm just leaving that nice thick line of blue, and then that kind of looks like the shadow part. And all you can do, look, you can just gently blend it, really, really gently, so it's not so much of a harsh jump. And then what that does, once it's blended, is again just make it look more 3D. And it just looks like the underneath with the blue is getting a bit of a shadow, and the top half, which is the lighter colour, the highlighted colour, is more in the sun. Just makes it look more 3D. And you just do the same trick, look, you just do the same trick up here. So you just go along the blue, let some of the blue shine up. Don't cover all of it. Leave some blue underneath. Just create a line that runs alongside it. And that blue underneath it will just make it look a little bit more 3D and in the shade. So now you've got this nice border, what you can do is use some of the colours. So I'm just going to mix a tiny bit of pink into some blue and white. So we've got some of that blue and we've got lots of white and a tiny bit of pink. What you can do, now you've got that big thick border, you can create zigzags that join into the border. And this is all the sort of sea foam. So when you have really, really shallow water, you have all this sort of churn and you have all these sort of bubbles and froth as the ocean meets the sand. So again, it's very, very subtle. We're nice and zoomed in so you can see it. But again, it's just to give another added layer of realism. So all these steps, as I say, just take your time with each step. If you're finding a step hard, just pause it, just rework it till you're able to move on to the next step. So I'm just creating zigzags that join up onto this thick border. Really subtle. And you can even have some in the far off. You can do little splodges for bubbles, little zigzags. So we can have some coming from our wave. I've been really enjoying doing these pastel seascapes, but I think I'm going to do a really close-up wave. Someone was asking for it on Instagram the other day, so I think I'm going to do a really close-up wave, if that would help people just to sort of understand the sort of barrel nature of a wave. And if we do a tutorial on that, people can learn it. There is plenty of tutorials now. I've created playlists for everyone. So there's a playlist called How to Paint Beaches, Waves, Seascapes, things like that. So, and there's one on landscape painting, there's one on forests, there's some on mountains. So if you want to sort of binge and learn a specific thing, just go to the playlist on the channel, and hopefully there'll be the right videos in the right section and you can learn what section you want to learn. So there we go, we just created some zigzags. And if you want to, you can just get pure white and just make your highlights just a little bit more vibrant. Just, as I say, the white will absorb some of the undercolour, so it won't be too harsh. It looks harsh now because we're laying it and the paint's wet, but when it dries, it won't be too harsh. So you can just use pure white just to go over certain edges, just to make them look more vibrant, and some of your zigzags. You can create some little bubbles and things. And again, if you dry your work and then go over the top with things like white, you can make it more vibrant. So if your zigzags aren't really noticeable, they're not standing out, just dry your work with a hairdryer and then just reapply the paint, and the white will look a lot more brighter and vibrant. Same with any other colours. So if you want to make your shadows a little bit darker, just dry it with a hairdryer and just reapply the paint, and it will just look a little bit darker. So all we're doing, we're just linking the froth to the wave. We're just linking the shallow water to the deeper water using these little zigzags. Such a relaxing scene, it's so nice. I'd love to be sitting at the beach right now. So that's looking super realistic, and then what we're going to do, we're just going to add a little bit of black to some blue and brown. So black, blue and brown, tiny bit of the phthalo turquoise, just a tiny bit. And then where we've just been creating that nice ridge, we're just going to go around it and just create the shadow again with that harsh darker colour. So I'm just going to the bottom of the ridge with a fine liner. I'm just outlining it. Again, just to make it look more precise, more pretty. So just take your time, try to have a steady hand. Use a really thin brush. That makes a hell of a difference because it's so easy to outline things. It's like having a sharp pen. And then we just want to make this sort of edge nice and rounded, not too sharp. So we make it nice and curved. And then when you've got that colour, what you can do, because our sand is nice and light in its brown shape, you can use this darker shadow colour and your fine liner and just create little sort of pebbles or shadows. So these could be bits of seaweed or pebbles or divots in the sand. So again, just like we did with the water, now we've got this underpainting with a nice sort of tan orangey brown. We can use darker colours just to add texture to it. So look, all I'm doing, I'm just creating random little dots and splats. All at random. If they're too harsh, look, you can use your finger just to smudge them. So if I zoom in for you. So I'm just putting all these little marks just all over the shop. All at different angles. So there we go, easy peasy. So that's looking super realistic. We've got our lovely sunset over the ocean and we've got our lovely waves. And what we're going to do, just to finish it off, because I want this tutorial to be a little bit harder, I want to push you a little bit. I'm going to mix some orange and purple and white. I'm just going to rework the clouds just to make them look a bit more realistic, because our waves look super realistic, so I want to make the clouds look more realistic. So I'm just going to make a darker shade of the shade we made earlier, so it's just got a little bit more purple in it than orange. Still got plenty of white to make it pastel, and just on the tops of these clouds I'm just making the shadows. So these are the areas that aren't getting as much sunlight. So again, all our transitions match. It's just to make these clouds look a bit harsher. So all these areas aren't getting as much sunlight. But the same technique as before. If I want to just sort of glaze areas, just blend into the transitions. A little bit darker. So again, just by making the clouds and the background sky a little bit darker in the corners, just frames your painting. So just glazing over the top. Got a dry brush, no water on it. Just making these a little bit harsher. And then we're going to take, if I can see, some orange and white and a little bit less purple this time. Sorry, it's off camera. So orange, white and a little bit less purple. And we're just going to create the same colour as we had before. So it's a little bit warmer, hence it's got more orange in it. It looks a bit harsh here, but we can do that glazing trick we did earlier with the yellow. Do you remember when we softened it up? But first I just want to add some highlights. So if you imagine, these are all the areas of the underneath of the clouds that are getting some sunlight. So they're going a little bit orange with the heat from the sun. So all on their underneath, on their bums, we're just trying to make it look like highlights. So just glazing the underneath of these clouds, just so it looks like they're getting a little bit of heat from the sun. See, how to paint sunset clouds is really easy when you know how. It's just knowing the cools. Now think of where you think the light's going to come, and then you can have one area in the sunlight and one area in the shade, and you can use cool colours for the shade and warm colours for the highlights. So if you decide that the sun's coming from the right, just have them on the right and have the cool shades on the left. It's really, really easy. So look, it looks a little bit harsh, but we'll go over it in a minute. So I'm just creating little odd ones, little floater clouds that are breaking off. And then look, we can just get some of that yellow and white and just glaze over the top. So we can mix some of that yellow and white, do you remember? So plenty of white, make it nice and buttery. Use a dry brush, wipe away most of the paint, and then look, just glaze over the top like you're colouring in with a crayon. And that just softens the transitions, makes this orange look less harsh. And if you're like me and it's all turned into a bit of a blob in the middle here, look, there's lots of sort of cloud, but there's not much background sky shining through. We can do this trick where we mix up some of the background sky and we can poke holes in it. But I'm just going to glaze this area first before we do that. So I'm just going to add more white. Do you remember I was saying earlier that sometimes you just have to go over your work once or twice just to make it look more vibrant with acrylics? So just by now it's dry, just using some white and a little tiny bit of yellow. I'm just trying to emphasize where the sunlight's coming from. So I'm just glazing this area, making it, using plenty of white, just trying to make it look more vibrant and bright. And again, it just makes those clouds look softer. Just use some white in between. So look, you can punch holes and just sort of delete your clouds if you want to. Look, you can just punch little holes and make them into different shapes. And you can do the same with the purple colour. So do you remember it was cobalt blue, purple, and lots of white to make that lavender colour. And look, you just use a fine liner and you just poke holes. Once my hand gets out of the way, you can see. So all I'm doing, look, if I don't like the shape of the clouds, I can just use the sky colour to poke holes and make them look better, more refined, more pretty. So again, if you have plenty of your paint mixed up, and if not, if you're like me and it's dried up, just remake it. It's no bother, and just punch some holes in the sky. So there's nothing you can't fix. Acrylics are brilliant because they dry so quick. They're so easy to blend. And if you make a mistake, you can just dry it with the hairdryer and just rework it. You don't have to wait hours or days with like you do with oil paints. So look, I'm just using pure white here. and I'm just trying to create the illusion of a far off sun that's sort of setting, so we get our sunset beach painting all nice and ready. She's looking super realistic, super vibrant and gorgeous. So now I'm just using some of the Naples yellow, because at the bottom, do you remember it's more yellow? I'm just punching holes again. So I'm just refining it where we've. So all you got to do, like if you think where you correct areas, just go back and forth, just like we did with the waves. If we worked on a bit of the wave, we still went back and outlined it. So just taking your time, seeing which area needs work. And if you punch a hole in your cloud and you don't like it, you can just use a baby wipe, or like me, just use your finger and just wipe it away, and your cloud will come back. So if you go a bit too gung-ho, you can always correct it. And I think she's finished. So I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. So you've learnt how to do a transition in your sky, how to use light, how to paint sunset clouds, how to do a transition in your ocean water, and then how to use colour to bring your waves, and how to paint waves, how to paint sea foam, and how to paint detail on your beach to create this gorgeous sunset beach landscape acrylic painting. So my name is Murray. Thank you so much for painting along with me real time today. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and thank you to everyone who's already done that and liked and subscribed to the channel. We have plenty of painting tutorials on the channel, so happy painting everyone, and take care. Look after yourself. See you soon. Bye.